This is Nan McKay, and this is part of our Pivot and Soar series. We are interviewing trailblazers who have pivoted away from their former career to another venture by creating a business. Our guest today is Robin Brewton. Robin is in the early stages of her pivot to becoming an executive coach. She describes herself as being an interior designer for businesses. So welcome, Robin.
Nan, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to get to visit with you today.
Well, take us on your pivot journey. What was your career prior to pivoting, and where are you now?
You know, I have been so blessed to have a wonderful career. Right out of college, I landed my dream job, and I think that's what really kickstarted me on a fabulous journey. I started out in human resources, but that was not a perfect fit for me. I was always more concerned about the revenue of the business, the operations side of the business, than I was about compensation and benefits. So even though I was in HR for, 20 years or more, I was always closely partnered with operations in every business I was in. So I think that was a natural segue for me to move into chief operating officer roles later in my career. I've been in C-level jobs with Wells Fargo, Cox Communications, Time Warner, and I've done a lot of work with small businesses. So being able to put that awesome career together and use it at this point in my life makes a great pivot for me.
So now you're thinking about going into, or you are starting into, executive coaching. Tell me what that means to you.
Thank you for asking the question in that way, because I think that natural assumption is that as an executive coach, I want to go in and help executives with their personal lives, with their leadership presence or their executive presence. And that's really not it. I want to be an executive coach more on their business savvy, their business acumen, and how are they running their business right now. I'm particularly passionate about small business, so I will be focusing on that executive, that CEO of small business, and saying, hey, what does your business look like? What are your operational problems? Who is your next hire? Who do we need to switch out in your business? Those kinds of things.
And then do you get into the financial end of it at all?
I think you have to. I don't want to dive deep. I'm not a CPA by any means, but I do think you have to start looking at that budget and saying, where are you putting your resources? So yeah, we'll do a little financial work as well.
One of the things that it seems people have such trouble with is social media marketing. I hear this over and over again. Tell me a little bit about what you're going to do in that area.
So I actually have a fairly significant background in marketing that just sort of comes with operations, particularly in a small business. You wear a lot of hats. So one of the businesses I spent about 10 years in was a startup. It was a financial technology firm that ultimately became pretty successful over the first 8 to 10 years. I spent a lot of time developing campaigns, putting together those email campaigns. We did lots on Facebook, on LinkedIn. Granted, technology has come a long way in the last 10 years or so, but I feel like I have a great background in that, and these small businesses will need that kind of help. And I also have some other resources to partner with, to recommend to them if they need more help than I can provide.
Interesting. You know, it's usually kind of scary to transition from a pretty secure job where most people are getting paid a fair amount of money that once they get
Yes.
to about 50. What was the primary reason that you decided to leave that kind of secure job and then start your new venture?
What a great question. And I've toyed with my ideas for a number of years. So it's always been in the back of my head. And I had a consulting business years ago. Um, I knew I would eventually get back to this, but I was in a very comfortable job doing really well. It was a chief operations officer role at a firm that had grown extremely rapidly. When I was hired, I came in really to clean things up, to bring order to the chaos from that rapid growth and create the infrastructure, the policies, the process, hire the right people. And at some point, it was sort of done. I'm a fixer. It was fixed. So about the same time as I came to that conclusion, my husband decided to retire. And it was just the perfect opportunity for me to say, I'm ready, the time is right. And I just made the leap.
So what advice would you have for somebody that's thinking about quitting their job and starting a business?
You know, as far as being at the point of being ready to give advice, I'm still kind of figuring some of those pieces out as well. I do think the most important thing I can say, the best piece of advice I can say is figure out your passion and run toward that. Don't run away from your job just because you're miserable. I see so many people who grasp at something, you know, the next get rich quick scheme, a multi-level marketing company, just to get out of the misery that they're in. And it doesn't make them happy. It's not successful. So instead of running away from that situation, find your passion and run toward it.
It's interesting. I think that the number one reason why people are afraid to pivot is financial. So how are you able to make that financial transition, especially when your husband was just retiring?
I agree that particularly women are incredibly afraid of making that leap for financial reasons. We cherish security. For me, I was blessed that we have prepared well for retirement. But I believe that if you are following your passion, you're not going to fail, that happiness is a trade-off for you, even if you're making less money. And I also believe if whatever you want to do is of value to others, success and therefore income will find you. That doesn't take the fear away. And I tell people often, if you have to, do it as a side hustle for a while until you have some revenue and are comfortable taking that leap.
And people, I think that's good advice. And especially if people are kind of nervous, how much money do you think people should set aside? I've heard 6 months, I've heard a year, I've heard 2 years. What do you think?
One of my past careers was a financial advisor. So I'm not going to offer advice, but I have a securities license, a Series 65. And I always tell people, you need a minimum of 6 months. If you're going to take a leap, you need at least that, and probably a year. You know, there are circumstances that people run up against and they can't wait that long. For example, if you have created a new widget that you believe the market's just right, you have to capitalize on that. You have to strike while that iron's hot, and you may need to dip into your savings a little bit. I don't like to recommend that, but if you can at all, be sure you have saved 6 to 12 months before you leave.
And when we talk about that, we're really talking about both personal and business expenses when we
Yes,
talk about
absolutely.
how much to save and over what period, right?
Yes, absolutely. Now, the good news is, at least from my own experience, so many of us who are starting a new career or a twilight career, a second career late in our lives, the costs are minimal. So, there's not as much of a business expense as we might think.
Particularly if we can do something online, right?
Absolutely. And a lot of what we need is simply our own expertise, our passion, our network, a telephone, and maybe a website.
So are those the first steps you took to create your business?
Yeah. I sort of analyzed those things. My website is still in process. I am working very hard on the content for it. And one of the pieces I'm going to have is a downloadable ebook that's free. And of course, that creates warm leads for you. But really, my first step was to create my value proposition. What is it that I have to offer a small business? And reached out to trusted people in my network to get their feedback to say, is this a viable business? Do you believe I have the skills and expertise to be successful at this? Do you have people you would recommend to me who need these services? So that was really what I did first.
I think that's really good advice. And those people that you talked to, were they both personal friends and business friends?
Yeah, I think so. The person, the two people in my life who I trust most from a business perspective are my husband and ironically my 22-year-old son. Um, he's he's just this very unique person, and those are really the only two personal friends that or acquaintances, connections that I reached out to. The rest of them were in my business network, very successful professionals, but trusted confidants as well.
How are you going to market this venture?
That's a great question. And the reality of that is, I don't want a ton of clients. I'm not selling a new widget. I just want a handful of people that I can really help, really make a difference for. And I already have enough referrals that I think for at least a year or two, I'm not going to have to spend a lot on marketing. I do want to start to put the brand out there as I hone it, and my website is ready and that ebook is ready. But I'm confident I'm not going to have to spend a lot on marketing.
And did those referrals come from the people that you asked in the beginning?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Not only, hey, Robin, I personally need your help with my business, or I have one friend who said, you know what, I'm on an advisory board at a startup and the CEO really needs what you have to offer. So I think those referrals will continue.
How did you decide how to price your services?
That's the hardest part for me. For me, and wanting to work with small businesses, and having been in small businesses, the reality is they don't have extra money to pay a huge consulting fee. They can't afford McKinsey to come in and help them with their issues. On the flip side of that, that's not why I'm doing this. I'm not trying to get rich. I'm trying to help people, but to do it in a way that I have some income as well. So I did a lot of research around consulting fees, everything from what the big firms charge to what I think is reasonable in smaller communities, which is where a lot of these people are going to be for me. And simply just figured out what was reasonable for those folks.
What is the process you're using? For instance, so you're reaching out to your referrals and you're getting a commitment at some point. You're probably explaining your service, getting a commitment. And then where do you go from there?
What a great question. And excuse me, once I have an engagement agreement signed with that small business, I go in, I'd love to do it face to face. I'm old and this Zoom thing is great, but I really prefer it face to face if at all possible. But I do a lot of Zoom calls and I typically meet with the CEO immediately and spend a couple of hours with that person talking about their why. Why did you start this business? What is it that you want to accomplish? What do you feel is wrong? Why are you engaging me? And just getting their perspective on where things are right now. Beyond that, I spend some time with each of the team members in the business if there is more than just the CEO. And then I start to put together sort of a prescriptive solution, if you will. And we sit down, we discuss it, we prioritize together, and then we begin to move forward with a sort of a scope of work, if you will.
Before we leave the entrepreneur part, I have other questions to ask, but I just want to be sure we get this one in. Tell us a little bit about the Jonathan Project.
Oh, thank you so much for asking. So Jonathan is a man from the Bible. He was the son of King Saul. He was a man of great honor, courage, loyalty, and he had the skill set to become a great king. But he knew that King David, future King David, had already been anointed by God to become king. So rather than be bitter about it, Jonathan came alongside David. He became his friend, his confidant. He encouraged David, provided wisdom and advice for him. And I loved that story and felt like as an older, a senior executive, I have some things I can offer to others. So I created the Jonathan Project for myself. It is my personal volunteer brand, if you will, where I work with really small businesses and startups who have no money, do not have money for consulting, and I work on a pro bono basis with them to talk about operations, marketing, all of those things I will do for a little bit bigger businesses or ones that are in a different spot, but just to provide them hopefully wisdom and sage advice as they get going.
Well, that's a really good volunteer type thing you're doing, because I think there are so many people out there that need it.
Absolutely. And again, I get referrals all of the time and have to be very particular about who I take, who I don't take. I have 4 current Jonathan Project clients, and I don't spend a lot of time with them, but it is rewarding for me. I love it.
What are 3 important lessons that you've learned so far?
I've learned a lot. I think the first one I would want to pass on to others is be smart be smart enough to know when you need help and ask for it, but be wise enough to know from whom to ask it.
And that's a hard decision, isn't it?
It is.
The right person.
Well, and I think when we get to a point in our careers, we've been through a lot, and there were times in that rising phase of our career where we thought we knew it all, and we thought that asking for help was weak. And finally, I get to a point, late in life where I understand the importance of asking for help, but I also see why you have to choose very carefully. Don't ask for marketing advice from somebody who doesn't have a successful business and, has done some marketing. But ask for help, but be careful who you ask for help from. That'd be my first one. My second one, it would be go slow to go fast. I heard that from one of my mentors years ago, and candidly, it took me a lot of years to understand what it really meant. But go slow to go fast. If you want to move quickly, regardless of whether it's in a consulting practice or launching a new widget that you've created, if you don't have a well-defined, well-thought-out process that's free of errors, you're going to be going backwards, retreating to correct your mistakes, and that's super expensive and time-consuming. So go slow to go fast. My third one is very simple. Kind beats smart. I've had the privilege of working with some really smart people, but I've also seen people destroyed by some of those smart individuals, and there's no reason to be unkind. There's no reason to treat people with deference. I think being kind, being encouraging, being a strong mentor for others is good for that person, good for you, good for business, good all the way around. So kind beats smart.
Well, those are good tips. What's your biggest tip for women thinking about becoming an entrepreneur?
We talked about women having a struggle with that financial leap. I think women are also afraid of failure. There's a poem out there I have read, I don't know how many times. It's called What If I Fail by Erin Hansen, and it's literally 4 or 5 little lines. There's freedom waiting for you on the breeze of the sky, and you ask, what if I fail? But oh, darling, what if you fly? I love that. I've loved that for years. And I would love to tell women who are thinking about becoming an entrepreneur to reframe their fear of failure and think about it in terms of what if you succeed wildly? And, sort of restating what we talked about earlier, if you are doing what you're passionate about, how can you fail?
What a wonderful piece of advice in a couple of different ways. Yes, yeah. I love the poem as well. What do you like best about this entrepreneurial lifestyle?
Sleeping in. And I'm serious about that. I am a night owl. I have often said I needed a career that allowed me to work 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. and 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. But short of working at a local convenience store or a split shift at IHOP, there just weren't many jobs around that allowed those time periods. And for me, it is fabulous to be able to schedule meetings and conversations on my time, when it works for me, and to do my work when I am at my most creative, which is late at night. And I know that's odd for most people, and it's against what every piece of research will tell you, but that's when I am creative. So the freedom, the flexibility, is wonderful. And then just doing things on my terms for the first time in my life, pretty amazing.
Not having to ask people for permission?
Uh, Not that I've been one that asked for permission a lot. I'm better at asking for forgiveness, but not having to worry about asking for forgiveness. I love that.
That's interesting. I think what you're describing is something that I used to teach a long time ago called the energy cycle. And it says plan out, with a timeline, what you're from X time in the morning, you want to wake up till you go to bed. And then where is your energy in what parts of the day? And it seems like that's what you're saying, that you've figured out what your energy cycle is, and you are programming your business time to match your energy cycle.
Absolutely. That is exactly it. And I've known since I was very young that that creative time for me was very, very late. It's when I studied in college. It just works for me. Now, my husband is a morning person, as in a very early morning person. And after 35 years, we finally come to some understanding about our differences. But yeah, I've always had a different energy cycle than most of the people around me.
It's been so much fun to talk with you. Do you have any other suggestions or thoughts you'd like to give to people?
Life really is too short to be unhappy. I wish I had figured that out and truly believe that way before now, way before, I was so close to literally the December of my life. I wish I had learned to stop thinking or worrying about what other people think. And I think women who are in your sweet spot, the ones you want to help so much that are over 50, are in this amazing spot where we are, where we have perhaps a financial luxury to do something different. We have a time in life where we have fewer responsibilities around family. We're closer to knowing what our passions are. And there's no better time to take that leap, to say, I finally want what I've evaded all of these years. It's finally time for me to make that leap. And I wish your listeners all the best as they cross that bridge. But don't be afraid, because the joys on the other side make the risks well worth it.
Well, thank you so much. It's just been so much fun just talking to you. You're at the beginning of your stage, and I really wanted to capture that. And now, as you go along the path, it's going to be so rewarding because you've seen both sides.
Yes, I have, and I'm extremely excited about where I'm going now. So, Nan, thank you for the conversation today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.